What is up? Good morning and welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot. Folks, it is time for Scott Fish Bowl. The summer is rolling in, and this is probably the biggest and longest running charity tournament in fantasy football. If you're not familiar, you're going to get really familiar with today's show. It's one of my favorite times of the year because it's kind of the kickoff to redraft fantasy football season, and it's such a fun tournament, and it's so different from anything else you're going to play. More waves went out yesterday. We're 3 weeks away from live draft starting. It's time to do a mock draft. Let's get into it. What is up? Good morning and welcome to Mock It Like It's Hot, Club Fantasy's weekly mock draft show. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. With me, as always, Austin Amandolia, the angelic one with the light coming from over top. Completely throws me off. Austin, how you doing today, buddy?
Doing good. Excited to do this mock draft now that we have official scoring for SFB.
Yeah, definitely very different than when we were doing mock drafts before and just kind of basing it on last year's scoring.
Yeah, exactly. And everything is different, which is going to be really fun and lead to some good conversations.
Yeah. And speaking of great conversations, our guest, a return guest from last year, though last year I didn't have you on for Scott Fish Bowl, though the whole kind of fantasy community knows you because you're a part of Scott Fish Bowl. Actor Mike Stoyanov. Mike, welcome back. How are you today, buddy?
Thank you so much, guys. Great to be here. Thanks for having me again. Very excited to be doing my my third Fish Bowl. Mixed results. First year, not great. Second year, last year, very fortunate. Had a really good year. This year, we shall see. I'm very excited. There's nothing like the Scott Fish Bowl kicking off the fantasy season. I think it's perfect in every way, and I'm just proud to be a part of it.
And we're happy to have you a part of our wonderful nerdy little fantasy football community. We're going to talk a little bit more because I remember you told me last year you play in some very kind of standard home leagues, and Scott Fish Bowl couldn't be more different. But I'm going to save that for a little bit later in the show. Austin, I'm going to have you do me a quick favor and get the Dynasty Nerds ticker up. Folks, we have a partnership with Dynasty Nerds. I'm going to dedicate today's show to Scott Fish Bowl, so I'm not going to say a lot about it. But if you are looking to get to be a better Dynasty fantasy football manager, you can sign up with Dynasty Nerds at 15% discount if you use code Club Fantasy. That'll be on the ticker at the bottom of the screen. And guys, it's Scott Fish Bowl time. The first thing I'm going to do is pop the rules up on the screen just for a few seconds while I talk. The big things about Scott Fish Bowl, this is different from just about any tournament that you play in. Quarterback's a little bit nerfed this year. We're going to talk more about that. But the big things you need to know, this is a big tight end premium tournament. And for the first time ever, return yards. And my goodness, there are a lot of points out there for return yards. So I'm going to leave that up for just a few seconds, and then I'm going to get the draft up on the screen. But I think that's the big thing, Austin, is nobody really runs a tournament the way Scott Fish runs a tournament, and he makes players viable that weren't viable before.
Yeah, exactly. There's always a fun little wrinkle. Sometimes it's just spamming the tight end premium rule. Sometimes it's extra penalties for interceptions and incomplete passes and whatnot. This year, I don't think I've ever played in a league like this where you have points for special teams players for returned kicks and punts. And I'm excited to see how it's going to shake up the game because I think there's going to be some interesting players who maybe they're the wide receiver 3 or 4 on their team, but they have that special teams role and suddenly they might be in play for a fantasy lineup.
I'm going to go ahead and get the draft started. We're going to talk more about Scott Fish Bowl. I am only running 15 rounds on this because if you've watched this show for any period of time, you know I do run over 1 hour. So 15 rounds. I believe I have 1 minute per pick. Hopefully I remember the third round reversal. I tried to make sure I did. I did. Good job, Ryan. So we're
30 seconds per round. It looks like.
Oh, did I keep it at 30? Can I change it in 1 minute? Hold on. Let's see if I can change this mid-draft while we're all sitting here chatting.
Oh, Ryan's going to get risky today with the rule changes mid-draft.
Yeah. Let's see what happens. I think it's going to kick it to a minute. I bet it's going to work. All right.
Yeah,
there we go. All right. So we're changing it back to a minute. But again, I only run 15 rounds. Also, if you watch this show, we are not going to recap every team. That is not what this is about. We are going to talk about the interesting picks, any trends, any theories we have for Scott Fish Bowl. At the end of the show, Austin and Mike will recap their teams. And if someone does something really bad, I will pick the oops of the draft. Let's start this thing talking about
please
Scott
don't let
Fish
it be me, please.
It could be. I'm not against.
I don't draft from 12. I have not. I'm out of position. I'm actually.
I was gonna say, yeah.
My true spot is much closer to the front, but I just thought it'd be fun to go from the back.
I probably already know what the oops of the draft is going to be because I'm really facetious about the oops of the draft. If there are players that I believe in that go way too late, I'm going to yell at all of you for not taking them. So that'll end up being my oops of the draft. And I probably could pre-predict it, but I'm not going to talk about it. I do want to talk about Scott Fishbowl just for a second. For folks who are not familiar, there's still time to sign up. Go to scottfishbowl.com. You can sign up right now. This is a charity tournament that benefits fantasycares.org, an organization founded by Scott and Ryan McDowell and many others in the fantasy industry that directly benefits Toys for Tots amongst some other charities. But I think the main benefactor is Toys for Tots. There's a lot more to Scott Fishbowl than just the fantasy football tournament. There is merch. I'm wearing my Scott Fishbowl 14 Blockbuster shirt. I worked at Blockbuster Video for many years, so I had to grab that shirt as soon as it became available. But there's such a great camaraderie and everything. I'm going to let you guys talk about that. Michael, I want to start with you. I know how Austin heard about Scott Fishbowl. I know how I heard of Scott Fishbowl. How did you, who loves fantasy football but not a part of this industry, where did Scott Fishbowl come to you when you joined 3 years ago?
Well, I had been messing around on like fantasy Twitter for a few months. Had just started a couple years ago. Like I've been into fantasy for decades, but I had just sort of discovered fantasy Twitter. And like, it had to have been definitely into June. And then someone who I'd been being sort of friendly and had a back and forth with was like, Scott had asked for more nominations. And someone was like, I'm going to nominate. And I was like, what this? Okay. I literally, my Scott Fishbowl IQ was very low. I was like, what are you talking about? It sounds great. I'm in, but like, so I got nominated via Twitter and got in. And yeah, that's, I've been a fish head ever since, for sure. And before we go any further, I just want to say one of the greatest things about it is it's all for charity. Everyone who can should go to fantasycares.org. It's a .org, right? And yes, give a little bit if you can. It feels great. And I just think it's an amazing thing Scott has done and that we do as a community. And again, I'm just super, super proud to be a part of it.
Now, Austin, am I correct that this is also your fourth Scott Fishbowl? You've been in 3 previously?
So this could be my third, but I actually have not gotten an invite yet.
Oh, I'm not worried about that.
I was a little late to the game on the registering, and I think I'm kind of probably far down the list. So hopefully we make it 3 in a row.
It's been years. I've been getting in kind of early, especially now with live drafts. The folks who are doing the live drafts, and we'll talk more about that shortly, get in a little bit earlier. But it used to be a running joke that I was always part of the last wave. I don't know if it had to do with my last name starting with a W or Scott just screwing with me, but I was almost always a part of the last wave. Austin, how did you do last year in Scott Fishbowl?
Bad, really bad. It was. There was one point somebody added me on Twitter and was like calling me out, like, damn, sorry this is going so rough for you, because I think I was in last place at one point, or like just above last place. Like I there was a certain point of the season where my goal switched from trying to do well to trying to not finish last.
And Mike, you kind of hit on it. It's been hit or miss for you as well. But last year, I know for a long time, you were a top 100, top 150 player.
I mean, I finished in the top 100 and I'm thrilled and I caught a ton of breaks. But before we go any further, just before I self-gloss, 2 years ago, I was in this 2 spot. My first pick was Herbert over Mahomes. Ooh. And my second pick was Trey Lance. So not great, Bob. I barely missed the playoffs. And but last year, I think I grabbed the right tight ends, and that was the end of the story. And then crazy things like happened. Like I got like Deontay Foreman because I was going to have like a week 7 problem. And like I had to use him in 2 weeks, and he scored like a combined like 65 points.
Yeah.
Like the only 2 weeks he did anything were the 2 weeks I needed him. So it was one of those years where like crazy shit just worked out. Like, so, you know, I felt great. And like you walk around the house, like, and then your wife is like, fantasy football, buddy, you're not all that. But like, you know, but at the end of the day, I got to give it up to like just good luck. Like you gotta have make some skillful moves, but like you gotta have the good luck too, for sure. In a league with 3,500 guys and girls,
yes,
you gotta catch some breaks.
Well, and Austin, that kind of leads to something that you love to talk about with the big tournaments, and I think Scott Fishbowl lends itself to this same sort of thing. So I'm gonna let you talk about it because you talk about it with best ball. Scott Fishbowl is a get different kind of tournament.
Yeah, 100%. You got to be willing to stake your claim on players. I'm still not a fan of like, I'm going to reach 2 rounds on this player because I just love them. Like that's a little bit overkill, but it's definitely a situation where you don't want to just do what everybody else is doing. And it's for charity. It's a free league essentially. Like you're donating. And so you're not expecting to win that money back. You're giving it away, which is great. And so why not play a little risky in your draft and see like if you can somehow take down the crown of miraculously being number 1. Like it's such a small chance. You might as well just have some fun with it, but also be a little strategic here and there.
Before we move further, I want to get Jamie up on the screen. Jamie said you couldn't have been worse than him last year because he was bottom 50 the whole year because he raised money for Fantasy Cares to draft Roschon Johnson at the 107. So clearly a believer in the skill level of Roschon Johnson, far more than the Bears were a believer in Roschon Johnson. Our own Josh Hudson did the same thing a few years ago to draft Younghoe Koo in the first round. So that's the fun of Scott Fishbowl, because when you do weird stuff like that, why not try to then win and see how it works out? But clearly for Jamie, it didn't work out well, and I don't think it worked out well for Josh either. Mike, I remember when you did our show last year, you were our very first redraft guest. And we talked a lot about your history with fantasy football, which I was going to let you share a little bit because you, like me, have been playing fantasy football pre-internet. So like we've been doing this for quite a long time. But what I really wanted you to focus on, talk about your history with fantasy football. But then I know you said you play in a lot of like standard scoring leagues, and Scott Fishbowl has got to be a wild adjustment for you in that situation.
It's true. Did we talk about like how I used to go get the USA Today?
Absolutely. Yep.
Look everything up, and then you'd call the commissioner. You'd be like, Tampa Bay had 5 sacks. You are only giving me. And now they're all right. We'll see, because and like it was so you had to be so on top of it. But it was a different world. Sorry, what was the rest of the question? I totally forgot.
So how does, having played football in a kind of like standard way, because you mentioned you're still doing auction leagues, which is something that has kind of fallen to be, it used to be the standard and now it's kind of niche. Yeah. It's just not what everybody does. But how big is the wild chain for Scott Fishbowl?
It's definitely big. I'm in only one traditional sort of snake redraft, but the other 2 are auction. One's an auction keeper league, but the scoring is very vanilla. So like when you get to Scott Fishbowl, I think that, and again, I feel like I didn't really understand 2 years ago how devastating, like taking a negative for an incomplete pass.
I was just going to say 2 years ago was the super negative year.
Start a quarterback. I had a -5 last week. This is horrible. So, you really, really need to you will be served well by taking a good look at the scoring and making some decisions based on that, making all decisions based on that, because he gives you what's it called, cheat codes. The rules, if properly applied, can be a bit of a cheat code. So I would urge everyone within earshot and eye shot to play.
I think that's really great advice. And then one other thing I've heard you talk about often, you just did a show with our good friends over at Optimus Fantasy.
Yes.
I was going to ask you for any advice for first-time participants in Scott Fishbowl, and you had already hit on the scoring. The scoring is very great. Right. But you have always been an ambassador of the camaraderie of Scott Fishbowl. And for folks like us who are in the industry, the camaraderie is kind of always there, but getting to meet folks not in the industry. But for you, it's different because you're coming in and you've talked about how accepting we all are, and we just love that you're willing to even talk to us. So,
I mentioned that to Nate last week, and between your group, your division group, and the conversations you get going on MFL or on Sleeper, and your Twitter group for your draft spot, and then my draft spot group from last year, that thread is still active and we still talk. So I just think and everyone is sort of really, really accepting, and you may not agree with every theory that you hear, but everyone is just nice about it. So no one is haughty. I think everyone has a strong grip on the fact that we're trying to figure out stuff that hasn't happened yet. So like you can be good at it. You can have all the right answers one year, and then you can just F it up like royally the next year. Like it's predicting the future. So like, I try and maintain a healthy attitude. And like I said, you gotta catch breaks. I have a lot of respect for like grinders, like analyst numbers type guys. I do some of that, but I think there you can get a good assessment. Looking at what has happened is informative towards what's going to happen, but I try and take a much broader approach and look at like big picture and like just any sort of nuance, like what's changed on the team. Is the defense better? Is the same QB? Like what, there's just, I just look at a lot of stuff and, I hope for the best. And yeah, that's pretty much my philosophy.
And prepare for the worst. Let's not forget that phrase, that part of the phrase.
Exactly. And listen to what everyone else has to say, because, everyone's got wisdom. Everyone if you listen, everyone will eventually say something where you're like, oh, that's interesting.
That's a good takeaway.
So
yeah, exactly.
I always want to give people their due in terms of like hearing them out. So
there you go. Austin, Mike gave us a lot there. Do you have anything else to add for folks who are in their first?
Talking about listening while talking for 5 straight minutes.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of like once you get into your league and you've been added to the sleeper league or added to the MFL league, which I think there are still some MFL leagues out there.
Yeah.
Go to the stat page and look at the previous year to see how players ended up scoring, because once you get into that league, all of the historic scoring is going to be matching this year's scoring.
New scoring. Yep.
Right. And so you can start to get a sense to understand how what performances last year translated to this year. That doesn't mean they're going to repeat what they did last year, but it can give you a sense of the types of players that were doing well a season ago or 2 seasons ago in this scoring.
Oh, wonderful tip. And then I am going to go by way of the live draft. And I'm going to throw Scamper's comment up on the screen. Register and attend a live draft, even if you're not participating. I did not realize how much fun I was going to have at the live draft last year. I had been to the Fantasy Football Expo in Canton. Very, very cool event, not knocking that at all. I had an absolute blast at the live draft. One, big fan of New York City. I love getting there anytime I have an opportunity to get there. And then being in a bar that we had completely rented out with just 100 people who love the exact same thing that you love, and getting to meet new people. And I had a friend who's actually going to be a guest on this show 2 weeks from now, who I met at this draft, who we now talk like almost daily. He's British, and I told him my son wants to go to school in England, and he's like, I'll give you any tips you need to help your son be able to do, like, at a Scott Fishbowl live draft, I'm meeting these people. It's just an absolutely awesome thing. So if you're not a part of the community, become a part of the community. And if you have a chance to go to one of these live drafts, go to one of these live drafts. For anyone new to the show, we will eventually talk about the draft. But again, that's not what this show's about. The draft is the background fodder. We're going to give you some really interesting tips. I'll recap the first 3 rounds here in a bit. But I wanted to get started. Mike, I remember from our time together that you are a Bears fan. And last year, you were apprehensive to be optimistic, mainly because nobody knew what to expect from Justin Fields. It clearly did not go the way you wanted it to go.
I was accurately apprehensive.
You were quite accurately apprehensive.
Although this year I am brimming with optimism. Like, I feel like as much as I like Justin Fields as a person and as an athlete, I think Caleb Williams, I'm hoping he is a big upgrade. What they did with the receiver core is absurd. Like, they've given him, it's like, all right, we haven't had a quarterback since Sid Luckman. That's the joke about us. You've got everything you need. Please be good. Please be good. So I'm excited. Weirdly, after decades of it sort of being a softy division, it's a really tough division.
It got really hard all of a sudden.
Finally are good, we hope, but the Packers and the Lions are 2 of the best teams in the conference. So it's like, oh, at least it's going to be fun though. Watching those games, that's 4 games there between just playing them each twice. That's going to be a lot of fun. And I don't want to say the Vikings. The Vikings are also.
I was just going to say, there might be some Vikings fans. Scott Fish is a Vikings fan. I don't know if you want to be going at Vikings fans right now, my guy.
I just think it's a tough division they've got, and I feel like fan or no, it's fair to say they may be in a bit of a rebuild mode. So I hope McCarthy works out for them. Like I hope that Williams works out for us. And they are the king of the sort of like surprise, we're good. Like they do that a lot. So not a couple years ago, it was like, wow, are you really this good? They like cruise to the playoffs. So I never rule the Vikings out, but I just think that even Bears aside, like the Lions and the Packers are legitimately both top 5 NFC teams. I'm getting slander from my friend Jason at the one spot here, and it's fair. But like I was trying to be as diplomatic as possible.
I love it. I want to first get you got Vince in the chat throwing DJ Moore's government name out there for the world. I had no idea this was this man's name, but that's a dark horse to be the wide receiver 1 this season. You got to be happy hearing things like that about the Bears.
I don't know about it, wide receiver 1, but I mean, I love the optimism, and like I think he's amazing. I'm not sure who's going to end up the 2, the old wily veteran or the flashy new rookie. I think Odunze could really surprise and end up being the guy drawing the second most targets.
Hold on a second. This is a pro Keenan Allen show, though I think Austin might be agreeing with you.
I'm not anti.
No Keenan Allen slander. None.
It's not slander. I just think that, again, so many mouths to feed and so many talented guys. I just hope that Williams is a fast learner and a fast adjuster to the speed of the pro game, and he gets there fast because he's got amazing weapons. Amazing.
That perfectly leads into Austin, what I wanted to ask you. I was looking at I'm insanely excited about the weapons there because we have, as we brought up, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen is, my God, I pray to him. I'm a big Keenan Allen guy. Rome Odunze, I've stopped my Cole Kmet hate. I think he is a very viable fantasy option and a good NFL tight end. You have DeAndre Swift in the backfield. Austin, I'm struggling to remember when there was a cast around a rookie quarterback, at least a highly hyped rookie quarterback like this. And I kind of went through my comps, and these are my 3 situational comps, and I love where they all finished. Russell Wilson as a rookie, Dak Prescott as a rookie, and the aforementioned Justin Herbert as a rookie. Russ was QB9, Dak was QB6, Herbert was QB9. I think a top 10 season out of Caleb Williams is very fair within our expectations for this kid, Austin.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. The thing that's also notable about at least 2 of those 3 guys you listed, they were fairly mobile their rookie year. Justin Herbert a little bit less so, but Dak Prescott, he used to score a ton of rushing touchdowns, which I feel like Caleb Williams definitely has in his bag. And Russell Wilson, like as a younger Russell Wilson, he was known for some of that dual threat ability. I think a top 10 season is definitely in the cards for Caleb Williams, particularly in this scoring setup where passing yards are actually devalued amongst quarterbacks, and those rushing yards that quarterbacks can offer could be a game changer.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I've statted him out early on as like my QB8, Mike. I think it's going to be a good season to be a Bears fan. I think you guys are going to be very happy.
I'm sorry. I'm like, right. I'm practically.
Oh, you're on your pick. Nope. I'll let it go. This
agree.
is actually a good time for me to say what I'm supposed to say. Jay is always there to remind me that like, subscribe, comment, do all the things that's going to help Club Fantasy grow. I'm seeing a ton of new names in the chat. If you guys are new to Club Fantasy in general, we go live now 7 times a week. We are fantasy football, everything from dynasty, redraft, best ball, mock drafts. We're there for you guys. It's absolutely free for you guys to go ahead and subscribe. We just recently crossed 1,000 followers. Let's get it to 2,000. You clicking subscribe is going to help with that. But Mike, I think it's going to be a good season for Bears fans. I was just going to let you put a cherry on top of that. So.
I mean, I have not been this excited about the Bears prospects in quite a while. So I fully agree. Hope for the best. Let's hope the defense takes a step forward. Yeah. I think even little things like if Swift can just stay healthy, I think that's a nice move. Like, again, I'm really excited. And like, I just want Caleb Williams to be the next Patrick Mahomes. Is that so hard? Is that too much? Have I gone too far?
I'm going to end it with no.
The sort of wish level comp that people use. So when
I watched his film I got Mahomes vibes. As someone who adores Patrick Mahomes, I've watched a ton on Patrick Mahomes. Those are the vibes I got. So let's keep that going. Let's keep you Bears fans very excited and very happy. So, all right, guys, quick recap of the draft. This is the only recap I'm going to do. I usually recap the first 3 rounds. We're going to spend the rest of the draft talking about some interesting picks. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started by listing the folks that are drafting with us. So we have Jay Sargent, friend of Mike's at the 101. MBI Fulco, I don't know what that is at 94. At 2. Gator J at 3. KW at 4. Christian Leo at 5. Duarte at 6. Geezy at 7. Austin took the 8 spot. Josh took the 9 spot. Roto not at 10. Wilson at 11. And Mike picking at the 12 spot. So he had the 12 and the 1. And they went quarterback heavy in the first 2 rounds. Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, CJ Stroud, McCaffrey goes at the 6, Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson 7 and 8, Bijan Robinson, CeeDee Lamb at 10, Jamar Chase at 11, and then Mike goes Anthony Richardson and Breece Hall to round out the first round, start the second round. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Kyler Murray, Jahmyr Gibbs, Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, Sam Laporta, A.J. Brown, Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, Saquon Barkley, and Dalton Kincaid round out the second round. Tight ends are finally starting to pick up there. Mike keeps that trend going with Trey McBride to start off the third. Jordan Love, Puka Nacua, Jonathan Taylor, Garrett Wilson, Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, Kyron Williams, George Kittle, Kyle Pitts, Marvin Harrison, and Caleb Williams at the 312 spot. Lots of tight ends, more tight ends than I thought. I wanted to start with a question that I thought was going to be more interesting than it is, but it didn't even go the way I wanted it to go. So, Mike, I do a keep trade cut every week on this show to kind of surprise Austin and make him mad. He always hates my questions. I think this one is way less interesting because of how this draft played out. So, Austin, the keep trade cut for this week, and I always make Austin go first. Mike, you'll get to go second after you hear his answer, is I'm calling it the first pick edition. You got the first pick of Scott Fishbowl. Are you going to go Josh Allen, Christian McCaffrey, or CeeDee Lamb? I wanted to go with 3 positions, but CeeDee Lamb went so late, and I don't know if it's interesting to have it that way. And when you look right away, Scampers called out Christian McCaffrey making it to 6 is already the oops of the draft. And I kind of agree with him there, but you have the first pick, Austin, keep trade cut, Josh Allen, Christian McCaffrey, last year's wide receiver 1, CeeDee Lamb.
Oh, wow. This is actually really difficult because of the scoring system. Because I don't want receivers to get overlooked here. It's hard to argue with McCaffrey at the 101, though, because of how he did last year.
Top scorer.
Yeah. Jeez, I think I'm gonna keep. I don't know. I really hate this. Actually,
I guess I should throw out while we're doing this. This is always a fun hypothetical game. There are no trades in Scott Fishbowl for those who are not aware. But the whole point of this is just getting these guys vibes on these players.
I say we keep Christian McCaffrey just because it feels wrong to trade or cut the top scorer from last year. I guess just based on value, you cut CeeDee Lamb and you trade Josh Allen. But see, the thing for me is it's hard. It's the hardest between Allen and McCaffrey because even though McCaffrey had the scoring he did last year, I feel like quarterbacks are still going to be really important, and having somebody who's dual threat is going to be really valuable. And if you're at the 1 spot and you don't take Allen, who the heck are you going to have as that dual threat quarterback with the serious upside? Like ending up with Caleb Williams in the 3rd round here. I mean, we talked about him being a potential top 10, fantasy quarterback this year. That could work out. But if somebody takes Williams earlier, you're going to be stuck with a bunch of guys who may have lower volume than Allen. So I don't love it, but I think the right answer is Christian McCaffrey as the key. All
right, Mike, how do you feel about that?
I agree. And it just sounds so weird to say this, that you cut CeeDee Lamb. Yeah. Although it's just bananas to that's frame anything where that would be a thing.
I joke that I created this just to get the sound bites of you guys saying you had to cut a really good player.
Exactly. Instead of just cut CeeDee Lamb, he is not a smart man. I'm going to disagree, though. What's that stat WAR, right? The WAR stat?
Wins
How much better are you than the guy? I think it's Allen because his WAR number is just going to be way higher than McCaffrey's. I think you can recoup. Also, it's a super flex league, and you only have to start. And again, look at the rules, people. You only have to start 1 running back. You only have to start one of each this year, and you have 5 flex spots. So you don't need to like last year. I was like, I want to go for other things, but I have to start 3 wide receivers. So like rounds 4 through 8, I was like, I have to take at least 3 wide receivers, even if I see what I think are a better running back or a better tight end on the board. It's like, because you're gonna give away points on those starting slots if you end up lower. You know what I'm saying? But so I keep Allen, I think, in this league specifically. Again, not only because he's a great quarterback, but he's a great running quarterback. And again, these rules, I'm on the clock, dictate that you gotta get that guy.
No, I think that's a great point. And I swear one of these days I am going to have to get Jamie Parag on the show with us, because this is now, I think, 2 times in the last month where he's asking better questions than what I had created. Mike, I normally let you guys wait till the end of the show to talk about your team, but you took Anthony Richardson at the 112 spot. With this scoring format, if you had an earlier pick, would you take Richardson over established guys like Patrick Mahomes or CJ Stroud?
I mean, that is an excellent question, and it's one I almost don't want to answer. But I just think if you believe that in a league like this, where first of all it's just for fun and for charity, and there's 3,500 plus other players, and you want to be big and you want to be different, I think Richardson makes a lot of sense with this year's scoring. Like, I love Stroud. I actually picked a spot early in the draft thinking, I want to start with Stroud. And then the scoring came up and I was like, I am now officially out of position for Stroud. Like, it's too early. And then I started thinking about, like, I thought that the top 4 would be the 3 you see up there: Allen, Hurts, Jackson, and then McCaffrey, some combination. But honestly, I'm seeing bold guys in mocks taking Richardson top 6, top 5 even. So like, I don't think I was pleased to see him at 12. I'll just leave it there. Like, that was like, this is a good start. I felt like.
I want to say you have Vince, who apparently is picking from the 12 spot, giving you props, saying he's loving your build and it's giving him ideas from the 12 spot. I had someone in the New York draft who didn't join because their slot was taken. And I'm going to caution you guys. We kind of get away from the point of this show sometimes, that this is all about learning through mock drafting. And I want you guys to be aware, join a mock even if your slot's not available. Seeing how someone else picks from your slot can give you ideas that you didn't know were going to be available. If you go into every mock draft from your spot and you pick the same team every time, you're going to think that's exactly how live drafts are going to go. That is not how live drafts are going to go, plain and simple. They're going to go very differently than what the mocks went, and you're not going to like the team you ended up with. But Mike, he's loving what you're showing him.
On that for sure. Don't go from your spot and don't take your guys, and then see
there you go.
Where it's like, if I don't take this guy, and sometimes you're like, oh wow, I am taking that guy a lot earlier than I thought. You'll learn a lot. Also, just go from somewhere else, just to feel what it feels like on that end of things, and then to watch what's happening on your end of things. I mean, if you have time, like me, who has no appreciable, I've got a wife and that's it. Like, when football season rolls around. So if you have the time, do a bunch of mocks and do them a bunch of different ways. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. Dame says it's mock subterfuge, but it's not just that. I think Mike hit my favorite point. There are 2 guys who we're going to talk about later, because it's the only thing I care about in Scott Fishbowl, that when I do mocks, I can't take them. I need to know where everyone else is taking them, because I need to know if I take them, they're going to go in the 2nd and 3rd round. I'm going to look like an asshole, but that's where I think they should be valued. I need to see where their actual value is. But before we get into that, our buddy Gator J jumping in with the super chat, and he is asking me to talk about his team, something I don't normally do, but if you pay me $1.99, we're going to talk about your team. Jay is going with bully tight end for the first time ever. Jay hosts a bunch of Scott Fishbowl mocks, but I think he said this is only his 3rd actual Scott Fishbowl mock, Austin. He starts off with Lamar Jackson and then gets the stack with Mark Andrews, goes Kyle Pitts, another Austin favorite, Jake Ferguson, before starting to go into some of his other players. Austin, how do we feel about him through 9 rounds of this 15-round mock?
I was okay with the first 2. Jake Ferguson was the one that got me on this build. I I loved it up until that point because you have Evan Ingram just right there, who led tight ends and receptions last season. So it's hard. I think that's where the bully tight end kind of felt like it goes a little bit overboard. My only issue too is that I don't love Mike Evans as my receiver. I have to start. Like, he was great last year, 11 touchdowns, hard to repeat. So I might shy away from the bully tight end, but I mean, if you're going to do it, Mark Andrews and Kyle Pitts, those are the boys. Jake Ferguson, I could take it or leave it.
There you go. I'm with that. How do you feel about this, Mike? This is a draft strategy that came into popularity a few years ago when Travis Kelce was God and Mark Andrews was getting to be there, and folks were finding ways to grab Kelce at the back end of the first round and Andrews early on in the third or fourth rounds.
Well, I mean, last year, Kelce was the 101 in a lot of divisions, and the 103 or better in like 90% of the divisions. But I like the strategy. I like these guys. I do like Ferguson. I mean, I think it's clear he's the receiver too there there's who else is there? Like I just like the way he plays, and I think he's talented. And that being said, I agree with Austin. I would have taken Ingram. How can you? I mean, the man in this league where volume is king, he had so many catches. He had 100 catches, and then they got rid of Ridley. So that's like there's more available this year. Like I love Ferguson. I don't fault this, and I think this is a get your guys type league. But in that specific choice, I think I also go with Ingram. But I'm not mad at it. I'm not mad at the choice of Ferguson. I just think that Ingram might be a better choice. But I like the strat, Gator. I think you've served yourself well for this league. You know, I like starting with Jackson at that point over Mahomes or Stroud or McCaffrey. But that's just I have had a harder time making. Is it me? Am I on the clock? Am I about to get started?
You got a little bit.
I've had a harder time making a McCaffrey start work for me in mocks, but that's not to say that it can. I've also had a few that really did turn out. I'm more comfortable with a quarterback if you're in the first 4 or 5 picks.
So I had a pretty good season of Scott Fishbowl last year, starting off with 3 running backs. I thought there was a break in the scoring last year where running backs were gaining value that people didn't realize. And I was able to start my draft with Jonathan Taylor, Bijan Robinson, and Christian McCaffrey. Not in that order. It was McCaffrey, Bijan, Jonathan Taylor. And obviously the Taylor thing didn't work out great for me, but the other 2 worked out great and I had a good season. I kind of got lucky. Jared Goff. And Jared Goff is another guy to watch with him playing like 13 dome games this year. His only bad game might be at Chicago, which is great for Mike and bad for Jared Goff managers. But I just found it interesting that the bully tight end works. I think Jake Ferguson over both Evan Ingram and a guy who I'm slowly falling in love with, Brock Bowers, that might be an early candidate for oops of the draft. I might be coming at Gator when this whole thing is over. I didn't quite love that pick there. And I agree with you guys. It's not a bad strategy. It could be a winning strategy. But I think there were better tight ends available at that spot. Even TJ Hawkinson, who's being terribly undervalued, but he's on my list to talk about a little bit later. I wanted to talk about the quarterbacks, and there's a player who got brought up last week, Austin, who people said is continually being disrespected. And I don't disagree with it. He's one of those things where he's a better fantasy option than what he looks like in real life, and that is Brock Purdy. So Brock Purdy in this 2 QB draft falls to the 3rd round as the 10th, 11th quarterback off the board. I wouldn't necessarily call that disrespect, but the other thing I'm noticing, Austin, is I was going to go into this draft telling you guys not to worry about hammering 2 quarterbacks. Nobody is worried about hammering 2 quarterbacks in Scott Fishbowl, apparently. The only person who really did it kind of early is Jeezy, but I don't know when his auto pick started. Jay Sargent did it from the end, but I always advocate doing weird shit from the ends of the draft because that's get your guy territory. But Austin, how do we feel about Brock Purdy, the fantasy asset? Because this guy was a top 5 quarterback for large portions of last year, but he largely goes unforgotten in fantasy, or goes forgotten in fantasy.
Yeah, I think in general in fantasy, he's a totally fine guy. He's kind of he's what Tom Brady used to be in some ways, where you wait and you just punt at quarterback, and then somehow Tom Brady falls to you because even though he's a great NFL quarterback, he doesn't have the fantasy output that some of the Russian quarterbacks had. Or like Aaron Rodgers a couple years ago, you could get him as the 10th to 12th quarterback overall. So I like, kind of punting at the quarterback spot and waiting for him to fall there. Beyond in this scoring, though, I do think he should fall at least a little bit, because the issue with him is that he might not get the same amount of volume as some of those other guys being drafted around him, because of the amount of run volume that the San Francisco offense gets and the amount of times they hand the ball off to Christian McCaffrey in the end zone. Quarterback passing touchdowns are going to be huge this year to offset the fact that you're getting half as many points for quarterback yardage. So I do think, him going where he is feels a little early to me. Could have discounted him a bit given some of the other quarterbacks who I think are going to be getting more pass volume than he is, but he is definitely a value. He has a pretty safe floor, so you can't hate on anyone for taking him.
Mike, what are your thoughts on Brock Purdy as someone who probably watches the game obviously through a fantasy lens, but also through a Bears lens? Brock Purdy, certainly in the NFC, is a quarterback that people seem to love to hate. Do you think there's too much hate going his way?
I think he gets too much hate as in terms of like team leader and like in the for reals NFL, like actually playing football. I think he does a pretty good job. And I think in vanilla scoring in general in fantasy, he's worthwhile. But I agree again with Austin that he's just not much of a runner. And that's it. 120 rushes for 600 yards, which is about what they're predicting a guy like Daniels is going to do. Yeah. That's the equivalent of 4,500 yards passing. That's
plus like the first downs.
Exactly. Not even counting the first down bonuses. There are no first down bonuses for throwing a first down. Yeah. It's just so the letters OP get thrown around a lot. But I mean, that's just a big deficit to make up. Like if you don't run much at all, anyone who runs is they're going to make up points in terms of like sheer yardage on you really, really fast this year. So you need to be like just a touchdown machine if you're not a runner at QB. I like Purdy in general. I love him as a football player. I think he's gutty and I think he's a good leader. And I like him about where he's at for regular scoring systems. Yeah. But I think I have done like a couple dozen mock drafts, and I'm disguising my nerdiness. It's more than that. But I'm trying to downplay it. And I have never gotten Brock Purdy. So like even when experimenting and like, someone always wants him more than me.
There you go. I think that's interesting because I'm kind of the same way. And like the narrative is that he's disrespected, but like, it seems like certainly in this draft, he goes early. I do want to get fantasy football mad science lab on the screen. They said this is the problem they have with mocks and Scott Fishbowl mocks in general is you have to take it with a grain of salt. QBs don't get punted like they do in mock drafts. And there is 100%. A point there that it seems like everybody kind of likes to wait on quarterbacks in mock drafts. But then when you get into the real draft, nobody likes to wait. And this is where I wanted to throw out at you guys. I have a theory on this scoring. Obviously, my projections are how I think things are going to play out. But when I pump in Scott Fishbowl scoring, quarterbacks, the like 20th quarterback, the 20th running back, and the 20th wide receiver all score the same amount of points. And that's kind of what Scott Fish was going for here is he didn't want anyone to feel like they had to build a team a certain way. And so my issue right now, Mike, and you're big on, know the scoring. My issue is I do feel like you have to get a quarterback early. I agree with you. Seeing Anthony Richardson fall to the 12th spot, great for people who like Anthony Richardson. Maybe not me, but that's a whole nother problem for a whole nother day. But I don't know that tapping quarterback early and often the way we do in every other Superflex draft is the way to go with Scott Fishbowl. Have you had a chance to dig that deep into the scoring where, like, just looking at that third round where Brock Purdy did go, Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, but around that same area, Kyle Pitts, Marvin Harrison Jr., Garrett Wilson, Jonathan Taylor, a round later, Drake London, Chris Olave, Travis Etienne. I don't know that passing up on some of these high-end running backs and wide receivers for a mid quarterback is going to work the way it should in a super flex for Scott Fishbowl.
again, I think with the scoring being so skewed between the two different types of quarterbacks, it's a real conundrum. You always catch me. I'm like literally right at my end of the draft. So I'm like half listening to you. And then I stumble through my answer. Like I was surprised to see on my last turn, I was like, oh my God, I need, because I believe you got to have 3 viable quarterbacks in this league.
Okay.
For the, and like I was surprised to see they were all gone except for Nix and Wilson in terms of and I guess Minshew. And I was like, oh man, that's early. Like usually there's a few other choices for my QB3. I don't love this guy. He makes me nervous. I'm not sure he's going to be the starter all year, but he does still run. He's an old man, but he still runs. So I will take Wilson. I've been taking Nix when confronted with that decision in the mocks, just because I'll take the rookie. Maybe it catch lightning in a bottle. But this time I was like, well, let's play it safe. We'll take the guy. If he starts all year, he should be one of those guys, a Konami type. He's going to run once in a while. He's not going to be a Rodgers or a Goff where it's like you're going to get no rushing yards, So in regard to the guys you're saying, the mid guys.
Well, you've kind of already made my point for me. You were able to get starting quarterbacks 5 rounds later. And I don't know if you need to grab those mid guys for that too, when I could get the starter 5 rounds later and these better players.
When I took Levis, I reached, frankly, there were, at least according to the current ADP, there were like 4 guys ahead of him. People like Watson again, because theoretically he's going to run. But I was like, you know what? First of all, it's just a mock. But I like Levis. I think they're transitioning. They're going to be a passing team first and foremost, maybe this year, which is exciting. They obviously have decided that they're going to give Levis the full sort of run and like the belief that he's a guy, a serious guy, a quarterback. So I took him. But yeah, I love Cousins and Goff and Rodgers. I think they're probably statistically going to have good years. But like I said, like 4,000 yards passing is not that many points this year in the Scott Fish Bowl. And you don't get any of the first down bonuses for passing. Like it's something to really think hard about.
Yeah.
I would say, again, just a little tidbit. If you end up with Rodgers, no one is taking Tyrod Taylor. By rounds 20, people are taking Howell, people are taking Drew Lock, people are taking Brissett. But Tyrod Taylor, if something happens to Rodgers, he is tailor-made for this scoring. No name, no wordplay intended. If I end up with Rodgers, I definitely am going to take one of my last 2 picks. Now that I've said this, now he's going to rise up.
Obviously, you are going to make Tyrod Taylor be the most important
Taylor if I end up with Rodgers, because he's a guy who could, if he finds himself thrust into the starting position, could actually be pretty valuable to you.
Yeah. Austin, just along those same lines, am I completely off base here? Is it super flex, steadfast rule, get your 2 quarterbacks in the first 4 rounds, or do you see some flexibility this year?
I see a ton of flexibility here. I also would not be surprised to see somebody like Kyler Murray actually going in the first round when the actual SFB drafts start to happen because of that rushing upside. Yeah. Even in my spot where Dak Prescott was available, I didn't love the pick. I contemplated just seeing what happened if I continued to punt the quarterback position, but I decided that Dak Prescott has enough of a floor that it was okay to take him there. But it wasn't clear cut. That's for sure. Like I think you could definitely do something similar to what Josh did, and just completely punt until the 5th round. I think he's the only team that took that strategy. Now we can talk about ending up with Kirk Cousins and how good you feel about that this year, but that strategy in theory, I think could really work out.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I feel like there's so many questions about some of those mid quarterbacks as well, where like Kirk Cousins, we want him to be great, and he looked great for 8 games last year, but he's also a 38-year-old man, 36-year-old man coming off of a Achilles tear. Not a fun situation to be in. One of the things that I find wildly interesting about Scott Fish Bowl, and I guess I need to scroll up here because I want the 4th round in here, is the return game. And 5 points per return yard could lead to some wild changes. And the player that I have to draw everyone's attention to is Rashid Shaheed going to Josh's team with the 4th round, 9th pick. Not a guy you would expect to see go there. I did do the math, and last year it would have made Rashid Shaheed a top 10 wide receiver. So this is trying to figure out where his ADP is going to line up with his value. But another player who does the return game, not quite as much as Rashid Shaheed, but could also be his team's wide receiver one that I want to draw everyone's attention to, is Jaden Reed, who went at the very end of the 8th round. Going into this, Mike, I heard you talk a few weeks ago on the show that you saw the return game and brought up Xavier Gibson from the Jets. Are you doing more research on the return guys than you've ever done in your fantasy career?
I mean, I'm doing a little for sure, and I like Jaden Reed regardless of whether he handles
Me too.
at cost. So I've been finding myself with him on my roster a fair amount. Yeah, guys like Mims, guys like it's hard to know. I mean, Scott Fish said that like the waiver wire is going to be crazy the first week with people picking up returners, and I believe that. The only like. A guy like Turpin is a good example of like, he was so good at it that teams were like, let's just not do this. Let's not give him. And it's kind of one of the easiest elements of a team's offense / scoring ability to take away. So we'll just kick the fucking ball. Sorry, excuse me.
We talk like that on this show. You're fine.
Dang ball out of bounds. Like, do not give this guy a chance. And that's my only fear. But I have been taking them. I like Shaheed, and I've seen the numbers, like the projections. Round 4 is aggressive, is bold, but I
agree.
Like if you want him and you have a strong belief, it's like, look, so you might be in the division where there's someone else is like, I'm getting this guy in round 5. Like, so like, yeah, you need to there are a couple guys like that where you got to like, it's like, all right. I mean, people are going to be like, what? This guy is reaching, but it's like, I don't want to lose this guy. That's the equation. Like, I don't want to lose him so much that I'm going to go in this round where it seems rash. Like I respect that. And I expect I'll be doing that on draft day on a few occasions.
There you go. Also, I'm not even going to have you comment on the return guys too much because we're already running over. But there is one question that was from a viewer that I think is a great question, and I'm going to kind of flip it a little bit. He says, when do we start building depth in Scott Fishbowl? And I think that's something that you definitely have to consider. But I also want to ask you, Austin, how do you go about your depth picks? And I find the most common strategies is taking the young lottery ticket or taking the guys that you think are cheat codes because of the premium scoring. Are you looking for some combination of that? Do you go in with like, I'm going to walk out of this draft with every rookie that's available after the 15th round?
Yeah, I think it is just, to me, it's mostly about value, like which players are falling that are, going under the radar because of the scoring or because of some team narrative. Like Jacoby Myers is somebody that I'm really into this year, like getting him in the 12th round. He's such a better player than that. It feels like it feels like so much of a steal, but I think I'm going to start deploying almost like more of a best ball type strategy where I'm going to focus a little bit on roster construction and team build. So I'm going to look at who are my quarterbacks. Do I have kind of a late player that I can stack with them, like a Mike Williams going in the 13th round to stack with Aaron Rodgers? Is there a Brandon Cooks in the 14th round, stacking him with Dak Prescott? Because again, if your goal is to score as highly as possible in Scott Fishbowl, it's a tournament. So you need to place bets on teams to succeed. And I've decided I'm placing bets on, I guess, the New York Jets and the Dallas Cowboys, which aren't horrible offenses to bet on. They're great offenses to bet on. So I'm going to kind of span that a little bit and try and take more of a best ball tournament strategy with this than anything. And then I'm also going to look at players who might come on towards the end of the year. So this could be those rookies that you're referring to, Ryan. It could be a guy like Nick Chubb, who is going to start the season probably pretty slow if he starts at all. And then maybe towards the end of the season, all of a sudden, he's a great fantasy asset.
And Mike, we had this discussion last year, just talking about redrafts in general, and you actually did it in this draft. So you know what? Let's get to your team. I'm going to go ahead and get it highlighted up here on the screen, Mike, but it's the same sort of question I want to ask you. And that is, do you tend to lean on the rookies because they are the lottery tickets? You did so in this draft. So start with that, and then let's go ahead and just talk about your team a little bit.
I mean, at a certain point in the draft, I find myself drawn to rookies more than, because like barring some sort of like massive shift in circumstances. It's like I'm seeing guys and I'm like, I feel confident. I know what this guy's going to do. And I'll take the leap into the unknown with the rookie, especially ones like rookie running backs tend to be positioned that like they're going to get run. And then if something happens, they're going to get a lot of run. And so like, I tend to go for them. I also tend to be real reactive. Like if someone I think shouldn't be there when it comes to me and he is there, I'll switch my whole strategy and be like, well, I have to take that guy because that guy, I just think that's a super value. And like, I didn't think I was going to be taking that position there, but I have to, and then I'll figure it out, as I go. But like, I like rookies. And again, it's a bigger swing type move generally. Yeah. So like in this league, I definitely like rookies. So that's why I have like 8 rookies.
I would say you literally ended your draft with 6 consecutive rookie picks. Let's go back to the start of the draft. So obviously the way I do this, you don't have to talk about every player, but I love what you said that if you feel like there was a guy who wasn't supposed to be there and you got him, any players you would on your team that you had a strategy with that you didn't get a chance to talk about, please talk about them now.
I don't see, I actually don't see anyone that I was pretty sure I was going to go QB and then Robinson or Hall. And if both of them had gone, which has happened, and again, I thought it was going to be Murray. You guys were talking about Murray a second ago. I thought I was going to end up with Murray, and then saw Richardson, and I was like, okay, that feels again like a bigger swing. I'll go with the big man. At Hall, I was happy to see. I think he's going to be great. McBride was a guy who I was like, wow, that's interesting. I was thinking I was going to take a tight end there, but I didn't think it was going to be him. I thought it was going to be someone a few rungs lower on the ADP.
Yeah, I was going to say, looking at what you've pulled off from this 12 spot, you got, in some people's minds, the best fantasy quarterback. Our good buddy Zach just put yesterday. Anthony Richardson, QB1. You got arguably the best fantasy running back with Breece Hall, who had an excellent year last year, and Trey McBride, who is some people's tight end 1, all from the 12 spot. Impressive stuff, Mike.
I thank you. Again, I just feel like I reacted to what I do. This is so much theory, and like I do tend to think what position I'm likely to get. Like I'm likely to go QB here. I'm likely to go, and then it's like I'll have a pool of like, I think I'm going to end up going QB tight end or QB running back. Here are the 2 or 3 QBs that are likely to be there. Here are the 2 or 3 running backs. And then I'll just decide and hope it's not a crazy outlier draft where like all of them go. I leave myself a pool so that like I'm prepared for, the number 1 I wanted is gone. Like, what do I do? Like, I know that I have the other, like, I've already made the case. I think people get stuck like, oh, that guy, and now I'm heartbroken and I can't recover. And there was no one. It's like, you need to like be like, all right, just in case, like, let me build an argument in my head for this guy. Like, well, because I might end up having to take him instead of the guy I really, really want. I've found a really smart bunch of 3,500 people, and they tend, they're going to take a lot of the guys you want. So like, you need to like have your other guys that it may end up you are having to look at and feel good about it. Like, make yourself feel good about other guys besides your number 1 guy.
What amazing advice. I don't know in our 3 years running this show that someone has really put it that concisely, that get hung up on a position, maybe not a guy, I think is such a good way to look at some of your draft picks. So thank you for that. Austin, you know the deal, my friend. I'm going to go ahead and get us off the screen so everybody can see all of your picks, but talk about your team, talk about who you want to talk about.
Yeah, so I decided to try and do like a mini 0 RB strategy. I didn't feel quite comfortable doing the full like go 6-7 rounds before first running back because of how valuable those points per carry can be. But I feel great ending up with Isaiah Pacheco in the 5th round. I think he's going to continue to get a ton of touches in that offense. And if Kansas City is going to take a step forward as an offense this year, he could end up getting more touchdowns as well because they'll be in the red zone more often and he'll potentially get those touchdown opportunities. Punting on tight end was an interesting scenario here. I only ended up with one tight end, but I got Dalton Schultz. So like getting the tight end in the CJ Stroud offense felt pretty good to me. And I decided, let's see what happens when I hammer wide receiver in this format, because one of the things that I've often done in Scott Fishbowl that has not always served me well is I get hung up on all of the positions that seem like they should crush it that year because of the scoring. So I'll take tight ends early. I'll take multiple quarterbacks early. The first year I did it, the kicking scoring was such that it seemed like there was an advantage to kickers. And so there were some people doing 4 kicker teams. I tried that. And you know what? Every time it has gone super poorly for me. So I've decided
no more trying.
It's still PPR scoring. They're getting a bonus for first downs. Why not still smash all of the elite receivers, especially when their value is falling the way they do? Like Chris Olave in the 4th round. Are you kidding me? That's freaking wild. Garrett Wilson in the 3rd round. Like, I'm getting incredible value on these players. And I was able to execute some stacks by getting Garrett Wilson with Aaron Rodgers in the 8th round. Like, he could be my second quarterback. And we should see, if he's healthy, we should see a step forward this year. We should see a pretty decent floor. So I love the way this team built out, and I just decided I'm not going to panic about running backs either. You know, maybe if we did this the full 22 rounds, I would have gone a little bit further and gotten some folks at the end. But overall, I feel really good about coming away with 3 solid running backs who can fill that one required running back spot.
Yeah, that's a really good point, is the one required spot. You don't have to start running backs in this PPR format. So the draft was kind of easy for me. I was going to pick on Jay. Jay says I should be picking on myself, by the way, for not having the settings in properly and starting you guys on a 30-second clock instead of a 1-minute clock. That's fine. But a lot of mistakes were made at the end of the draft that I have to yell at you guys about. Thankfully, not by either of my co-hosts today. Folks, we do not draft kickers before the last round, specifically on the sleeper format. There is an argument to be made on MFL where kickers can have some flex value because you can flex kickers on MFL. In Sleeper, you are required to start 1 kicker. There are 32 starting kickers and 12 people in your league. Do not let me catch you watch this show and drafting a kicker at any point before the 20s in the rounds. Unacceptable, people. Unacceptable. Guys, that is going to wrap up this show. First and foremost, Mike, thank you so very much. 2 years in a row, a tradition I plan to keep going for as many years as you'll allow it. Let people know where they can follow you. And if you have anything going on right now, I wanted to say, I didn't get a chance to mention this last time. Obviously, was a huge fan of Blossom growing up, but you have now hit 2 of my favorite post-adolescent TV shows, Blacklist and Justified. You've done roles on. So again, I love whenever you get to pop up on the screen when I'm rewatching these shows, like, hey, I know that guy. It's like awesome. So thank you again for taking your time to be with us. Let people know what you're working on and where they can follow.
Thank you. I'm not. It's all football from here till January for me.
Okay.
It's like I said this to Nate and the Optimist guys. Like I don't really follow baseball or basketball anymore. Used to be a big boxing fan. I'm not really. This is it. This is all I have. This is why. But you got to pardon my exuberance and how excited I get. Like this is, and I'm allowed the full breadth of like the whole, like I've got the Sunday ticket. I just nerd out for 6 solid months. And then I give the other 6 months of the year to my wife and my life. And like, it seems like a happy balance. I haven't heard that it isn't yet, but I might, but yeah. So I just, I'm really happy to come on anytime. And anytime you want to do this, I'll see you next year. Hopefully we're all in. And everyone that's listening gets into the Scott Fishbowl because it's an amazing, amazing, amazing league.
Yeah, you never have to pardon your exuberance with us. We are your people. Anybody who is watching a mock draft show in June.
Of course. Thank you.
Austin, what do you got going on, my friend?
Yeah, as usual, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Austin_FFL. Catch all of my video podcast content at clubfantasyffl.com on YouTube, and check out our website for my written content. And then you can also catch all of my Carolina Panthers coverage at Last Word on NFL.
So this number has went up every week for the last 3 weeks. Club Fantasy is now at 7 live shows every week, and Austin's going to make it 8 here eventually. We cover everything for redraft, dynasty, best ball, and then we do these mock draft shows to help you guys get better at all of it. We even have a fantasy golf show. There is no reason for you not to hit the damn button, subscribe. It's absolutely free. It helps us. We'll be back mock drafting on Monday. That's going to be Mocking with the Stars with Gator Jay and Chris. We also have 2 new shows you guys need to be aware of. Now we have Trade Blocked. That is our Dynasty trade show. That's Joel Worth, HoofTube, and Dusty, who are going to be walking you guys through some Dynasty trades where they value players. It's an excellent show for those new or who have been in Dynasty in a while if you just want to feel the value on certain players out. And also another mock draft show, Mock Girl Summer, hosted by Wendy Early and Julia Papworth. That is on Thursdays. Every Wednesday is our flagship show, no pun intended. This week we are covering the Seahawks, Jaguars, and Bengals with Chris Allen from Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life. It is going to be 8 o'clock Eastern this time around. And guys, that's it. Make sure you hit subscribe. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you're following these great guys. Good luck in Scott Fishbowl, unless you're in the Blade division. And then I wish absolutely nothing but bad things to happen to you. Always remember, defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy football, and practice makes perfect. We will see you at the next mock draft.